episode 13 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I am super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast to help you go vegan. Every 2 weeks, I'll share a new episode discussing all things vegan. Most importantly, we'll talk about how to embrace this meaningful decision with fervor and fun. Episodes post every other Monday on your favorite podcast app. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Before we jump into today's content, I wanted to share some exciting news from Did You Bring the Hummus? I have launched a membership site. You can find the link in the show notes. If you are vegan curious or a new vegan looking for a safe space to ask questions, share your struggles, and have support as you embrace this beautiful lifestyle, this is the place you've been waiting for. As we build the community together, you can expect live calls with me, weekly challenges, recipes, guidance, guest speakers, and more. I am over the moon about this, and I know you will be too. In today's episode, I sit down with Dave Baldwin. Dave has been vegan since 2016, and as you'll hear, his vegan journey was influenced by living with a Vegfest organizer for nearly 6 years. Dave has a passion for psychology, inspired by his own journey with overcoming compulsive eating and weight loss. He also has a long-term vision for building new communities. Dave and I discussed food, compassion outside of the typical vegan scope and places where you typically expect a vegan approach, as well as how to show up in alignment with our values when it is most difficult. Here we go. Hi, Dave. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Kimberly, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Because the focus of Did You Bring the Hummus is to inspire people to go vegan, I always like for everyone to tell their story. How did you go vegan?
So I went vegan in February 2016, and I was greatly influenced by my housemate at the time. I lived with the organizer of a Vegfest for close to 6 years. I think we both know her. You've done some other interviews with her, Helene from the Triangle Vegfest. So I lived with her from 2014 to 2020. And the first year I was still eating meat. Although I would say prior to that, I had gone a good portion of my diet was already vegan, just basically because that was the habit I was kind of in. I was eating less and less meat. For a variety of different reasons. I think I was trying to make a conscientious effort to eat vegetables and everything, but I just I think, got surrounded by osmosis by the vegan community and heard more and more tidbits and pieces from going to the events and tagging along to Vegfest and running into other people in the community and getting some exposure to different pieces of information that I think for me, one of the biggest factors, and it wasn't particularly new information, but I just heard about it more frequently, was some of the environmental impact of the meat industry as contrasted with the environmental impact of growing more sustainable types of crops. I had heard years before about how if you produce cattle on a farm, the land you can only do it for about a few years, and then the land essentially becomes useless for anything else, and how it produces a lot of waste, and it's just the overall downstream impact in not only direct but also indirect areas. That was a big tipping point for me. But then over time, I started to become aware more of the different impact from an ethical standpoint. And I've definitely, I think differently about it. And I think another factor was that I just started to see animals differently, partly because there was 5 animals at the house. Well, the number of animals changed over time. When, as of now, I think the total count is 5. But I think I began to have more of a relationship with animals, not just the animals that I lived with, but when I went to other people's houses, it changed the way I look at animals overall. And so I think looking at a piece of meat on a plate doesn't look the same as it used to. So I guess I just don't really have a desire to eat meat. It's not really ever something that I've looked back and said, "Oh, I'm tempted to go have a burger or whatever." I mean, but frankly, I have to say it's kind of easy to be vegan these days with all the meat substitutes out there. So, but that's my story in a nutshell.
That moment where you stop looking at animal products as food is like, that's when you know you're like over the hump, right? That was the same thing for me. My story, I had read an issue of PETA's Animal Times, and I it like really jarred me, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that anymore, but I didn't know what else to eat. But I had already stopped viewing animals as food, so it didn't matter that I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to have. Um, I just knew what I wasn't going to have. Anytime I saw meat on someone else's plate, it just wasn't food, you know? And that really like just sunk in and made it so it was not even a temptation. And like you said, now it's so easy. You can find so many different versions of whatever your favorite animal product was. There's a vegan version of it now, and they're really good.
Definitely. Well, I mean, they haven't made a vegan version of veal, but
Oh.
that's probably, yeah. That, but anyhow, but everything else, yeah. I mean, I'm actually amazed at how good the cheese is in particular. I think the one of my favorite ones is the vegan provolone cheese you can get, and the vegan mozzarella. I mean, that's way beyond anything you could get 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I think a lot of people are still thinking about smart dogs and tofurkey, which is, I always say, is the lowest possible grade of vegan product you can get. Apologies to the brands, but maybe they need to just step up their game a bit. But yeah, the cheeses, I think it seems like there was a heavy investment in making vegan cheeses just because that was the line for vegetarians that said, look, I'll give up meat, but ain't no way I'm giving up cheese. I think I heard that from a lot of different directions. And I think they've gone very far in making that no longer a barrier for people. So it's but yeah, I mean, it continues to improve. Also, it's really impressive just to see how many different products are out there that just replicate the textures of meat and dairy. And well, I personally like the egg products. I know not everybody, those are, I think they've got a ways to go. They haven't perfectly replicated actual eggs, but they'll get there. I mean, I think especially with 3D printing of food and all these different technologies they keep investing in, I'm thinking we're going to get to the point where it's like Star Trek, the next generation. We just be like, computer steak, and it makes it out of broccoli, but nobody
Right.
can tell the difference.
That would be amazing.
Oh yeah.
The cheese thing, I think about all the people that I talk to, because I talk to a lot of people who aren't vegan, right? And it's always that, like, that's fine. You want me to give up animal products or meat? Good, I can do that, but don't try to take away my cheese. I'll take cheese to the grave with me. No, 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 I'm not going to give that up. But yeah, the cheeses, they're getting better. And I mean, even look at what Ben and Jerry's has done. When Cory Booker said, I want to go vegan, but I can't stop eating Ben and Jerry's. If only Ben and Jerry's would start making vegan ice cream, I could go vegan. And now
They
Ben and
did.
Jerry's,
And you can buy it in pretty much any grocery store,
yes.
most of them anyway. Yeah. And the Cherry Garcia vegan version, really good. Oh yeah. I have to restrain myself from and it's, I almost wish they didn't, because it was easier when there was no vegan ice cream to just not eat any. But now I'm like, man, so it's a temptation that's been reintroduced again.
Yeah, same for me. And they're up to like 17 flavors now. It's
Oh,
yeah.
17 non-v or 17 vegan flavor. I didn't even realize they had that many, but
Yeah.
that's not terribly surprising.
Yeah, they hit the ground running with that. So thank you, Cory Booker, senator from my state. So proud. So, Dave, you and I were, when we talked earlier, you had a really interesting thought around how veganism and our compassion, and I think the way that we just show up in the world, is kind of missing or needs an enhancement within the business world, the business community. So I would love for you to tell us about your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I think any community that claims to espouse any given value, the first thing everybody's going to notice is where that value is missing. I think it's not, this is not unique to vegans. This is any group of people, but I think that really the one one thing I think really is a much more effective way to express any kind of value is to think not in terms of what you aren't going to do, but what you are going to do, thinking of it in positive language. And so I think a lot of times for a lot of people, you hear vegan and it's like, okay, it means don't eat meat, don't eat eggs, and don't, and then there's the more extreme versions of it I've heard of, right? Like don't buy or consume or have social relations with anybody that knows anyone who's ever bought anything that contained an animal. But yeah, so I think there's the more positive way to look at it. If you think of compassion as being the core driving value behind the vegan community, what does compassion mean in the larger sense of things beyond the consumption of animal products or even environmental impact or any of the surrounding peripheral issues? I think that for me, compassion begins with having compassion for people who don't think like I do. And I think this is again, not a unique problem to vegans, but an issue that I've seen in any other type of communities. I mean, it happens in religious communities, self-development groups, and all other kinds of different things, political circles, you name it. And what happens is that you've got people that the more you just associate, I for lack of a better word, call it incestuously, with people who think the way you do and seek out agreement. And what happens is your ability to tolerate disagreement becomes less over time. And I think it's almost just because it's almost like if you live where the temperature never deviates from within a 5-degree range. As soon as it gets a little bit hotter or a little bit colder, you're extremely uncomfortable, and so your tendency is to pull back in there. And that same thing happens in social circles too. So I think that to the expression of compassion, in order for that to really be a sustainable thing, the first thing that has to happen is you have to seek out diverse groups of people. And I'm not just talking about ethnically or racially diverse, but people that are likely to have strong disagreements with you on core issues. That includes people that eat meat and think it's perfectly fine to eat meat, whatever that is. Yeah. And instead of thinking that, they're wrong and they're bad people, it's, well, what's the opportunity for a conversation here? What can I learn from this? And what does a productive conversation look like? I also think it requires sometimes just being able to just look at, figure out if there's a conversation to be had or not. I think if you see somebody is completely closed-minded, it's not even, I mean, I learned that a lot of times my tendency is to just keep my mouth shut and wait until there's something productive to say or there's an opening. I mean, I have a guiding philosophy of I don't waste words on people that aren't listening. So that's I think a big piece of it. But but if you look at compassion that way, you can extend compassion into a lot of different areas that might not be automatically associated to or attributed to veganism. It might not necessarily be something that people would obviously think of as something that's inherently vegan as a behavior. But if you associate like vegans are people that exemplify compassion, one simple way to do that is to smile at a stranger on the street, or perform a random act of kindness without necessarily worrying about whether somebody saw you do it or not, but to instill those types of habits. And I think the last piece I'll say on the subject of compassion, although I can certainly expand on any of these areas if you want to, but the last piece that comes to mind for me is self-focus. I think that's a core principle with any kind of personal development that I do. The idea is to direct the focus inward, to use I language and I statements, and say, what can I be responsible for? What habits do I need to change? What's my commitment? Because I can't do anything about anyone else. I can't change anybody else's behavior or anyone else's attitudes. And it's a much more productive use of my time to look at, am I saying that I want to be compassionate, but am I doing things that are not necessarily all that compassionate? And why is that? How do I get to the root of that? Because I have total power over my own behavior and thinking. I have no power over anyone else's. So I think that's really, in order to express compassion effectively, there has to be a self-focus. So that's kind of my overarching view on compassion. And I don't know if you had any other areas of that you wanted to go into. I'm certainly happy to, but that's kind of the 30,000 foot view.
Okay. That reminds me the last point about how, we have to remember that we can only control ourselves. When I first went vegetarian, I was only 19, and I know that for me and a lot of vegans and vegetarians I've talked to, that as soon as they go vegan or vegetarian, they want to tell everybody, and they're like, you have to stop eating meat, and here are all the reasons why, and it's really awful, and you have to join me. Come, do this now. And then it leads to fights and it leads to frustration. And you're like, what is wrong with everyone in my life? Why don't they see it this way? And, at 19, I certainly didn't have or I wasn't prepared to like look within and be like, nope, this is just what you're doing. And how you get other people to listen is by just doing what you want to do, being happy, being good with yourself, showing people how easy it is or how happy it makes you, content it makes you, and then let them kind of come to you. Because when people feel loved and not judged, which that's the overarching thing of Did You Bring the Hummus, is that, I don't want anyone to ever feel judged when they listen to this or they take part in any part of Did You Bring the Hummus. I always want people to feel safe. And that comes from compassion. We have to have compassion for people who, like you said, don't think the way we do. And even, if you want to look out at the country that we live in right now, it's been really difficult, I think, for everybody to either give compassion or even to receive it. Some people, they're so divided, they don't even want to get a kindness from a person who isn't in the same, um, looking out from the same viewpoint.
Well, yeah, and I think yes, you're definitely right about that. I've noticed that same thing. I mean, yeah, and I think part of the issue is sometimes we have a degree of cynicism that it's almost like if somebody wants to do something kind, it's what's the catch? There's got to be a string attached. They're really just trying to get their hooks into me, or they really just want something from me and they don't want to. So I think that can play a role in the unwillingness to receive acts of kindness. I think that's definitely maybe not always the case when in those situations, but I think it can definitely be one factor that comes into play. But I think there's maybe a more subtle factor that comes in, which is the thought that I'm going to feel guilty about receiving compassion, especially if it creates cognitive dissonance and they make me feel some way that I don't want to feel, especially if it's somebody that I don't want to like, and now you're making me like you. That just creates a mix of emotions that people just don't want to deal with. So the easiest thing to do is just slam the door and say, I don't need your help or whatever. But to kind of get back to your earlier point about what happens when you first become vegan and the conversation starts to twist. I mean, I'll tell you, I wish I could be as smart as I was when I was 19. I mean, I was like the smartest guy on earth back then. I'm not really sure how I got so dumb, but yeah, I can definitely see. And so I think, age is definitely a factor, but I think regardless of age, there's always a metamorphosis of a kind that happens when you're exposed to a different way of thinking. And veganism was not my first experience with this. I mean, I think in 2007, I remember going to a conference for a nonprofit where there was a number of people that came from all over the world, and there was a conversation about world hunger. And I remember just seeing the contrast of that conversation versus being at work earlier on that week and seeing the conversation around the water cooler of everybody griping about how miserable they were at their job. And I just remember it was almost like it felt like breathing different air. And I know that I've had that type of experience several times where I'm exposed to different kinds of thinking. And the tendency is there's this like almost like a religious conversion experience that happens. Like you get all, like you said, hey, what's wrong with everybody in my life if they don't think like this?
Mhm.
And I think over time I've learned to temper that and recognize first of all, the temporary nature of it at first, and also the potential alienating effect that can happen if I go to people who have not been exposed to whatever shiny object thinking that I've been exposed to, and start speaking condescendingly to them or with excessive fervor in the hopes that I'm going to get them all to think like I do. So I don't feel like I particularly had that issue with veganism just because I'd already been there and done that and bought the t-shirt earlier in life. But that said, I did notice that I made the mistake of starting to talk too much about it on social media. And from the response and comments from the peanut gallery, what I noticed was that there's a way talking about veganism is heard by the non-vegan communities, just because essentially there's a lot of stereotypes that pop up. I remember one of the memes I saw about it was there's a guy says, "Hey, I'm vegan and I haven't told anybody in 15 minutes." And I remember just getting some blowback and some comments to basically to the effect of, so I guess now that you're vegan, you're going to try and get all of us to go vegan now, huh? And I was like, well, no, I actually didn't say that, but I get that that's what people are hearing. And I think I just kind of noticed that I started dialing it back just because it was very quick to be, people were very quick to perceive if I said I'm vegan, like there was almost all right, what's coming next here? And so I think generally what I've learned from that whole experience is it's better to listen and observe more and talk less until I have a deliberate purpose for what I want to say and what difference I think I want to make. It's easy to do more harm than good trying to basically evangelize veganism or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That makes me think about all the back and forth that I've even done with at first it was very much in your face and like, look at how all this cruelty and stop doing that. I'll answer any questions that you have. Come, let me help you. And that didn't really get a whole lot. And then I stopped talking about it at all. And I'd only mention it if, I was going to eat somewhere with someone or someone was preparing food and I had to tell them. I was in a situation where they needed to know. But I didn't like that. That wasn't being true to me. So then I started sharing things about food. What better way to get into someone's ear than through their stomach? So it does kind of ebb and flow, and I think everyone will find their place and figure out their correct approach, but we have to be willing to listen. So
No,
we
you're absolutely right about sharing pictures of food. That does go a long way. I have noticed that same thing myself. And for all the negative commentary I got, there also, I have to acknowledge, there was a lot of positive feedback from people that started following along and becoming curious. And I think part of it is like it's never been my goal to convince anybody to go vegan, because part of it is, frankly, I'm not going to say there's I'm not wrong about being compassionate. I'm not wrong about trying to do what's best for the environment and animals and everything like that. But I could easily be wrong about my interpretation of what being vegan should look like on the subtler levels. And I'm by no means an expert on diet or anything along those lines. I mean, I vegan, there's people who have studied the animal industry could run circles around me. I say you should probably go talk to those people because they've got a lot more information than I do. But I think with sharing pictures of food, I mean, you can't go, it's like, here, have some vegan meatballs or vegan sausage or pizza slices or I mean, there's just I think a lot more, and the awareness of it is more now than it used to be, but there's just so many things you can eat that are, I think the tofu and spinach stereotype is slowly dying. That you can eat a lot of really good stuff. In fact, you can eat a really bad, unhealthy diet and still be vegan if that's what you want. I mean, and it's not just French fries and vegan mayonnaise. I mean, there's plenty of vegan junk food options out there too. But it's so I think there's the like pictures and just the lighter topics are good for ice breaking. And I think once in a while somebody will pop up on social media or say like, hey, I'm thinking about going vegan or all that kind of stuff, or what have you found out, what resources can you find? And I know that Helene still has a triangle. It's the triangle vegan recipes page, which is it's all food with no politics, no spam, and no drama. It's just food, and I think that seems to be a really good principle. So yeah, I think you're right on the money with that one. I think that's the more we just focus, because if you think about the symbolism of food and cultures, food is what brings people together. It's like if you want to get to know somebody better, it's let's get together for a meal. And I don't really see that changing. I mean, who knows? Maybe at some point, well, people will just learn how to not eat, but I don't see that happening in my lifetime. Frankly, I don't really. I hope I don't see that happen. But
Me neither. Yeah, and so much more, there are so many things just around food, like you said, coming together, because it's not just an opportunity to have great conversation. It's also an opportunity to really get into another culture, to experience the spices and the types of foods that maybe you've never been exposed to before. And so it can completely transport you to another part of the world, just by sitting down at someone's table and eating with them. And then the stories, there's so many stories attached to food, right? I can think of a handful, at least off the top of my head, of different stories I have associated with either certain family members or holidays. I think that we all have that.
yeah, I mean, I think about, yeah, I mean, you can, the stories you can tell about food. I mean, I think it ranges from family growing up, and then you've got the food and the way it plays a role in culture. And then when you bring the vegan community into it, now you've got the element of taking traditionally non-vegan dishes and making them vegan. And you can I mean, I couldn't name anything off the top of my head that can't be made vegan. There's nothing I specifically know of could come up with. But and I think about how I've been to some meetup events that were potluck style with vegan dishes. And the interesting kind of distinction is I've noticed in as soon as you get into the vegan communities, you tend to have a lot more people with food allergies or food sensitivities. And so they're much more particular about wanting to know everything that's in the dish. And are you absolutely sure it's, don't even think about bringing something saying it's vegan and it's not. And it's like, well, I only put a little bit of Parmesan cheese in there. No, that's, and then you also have people that have soy allergies, gluten sensitivity, nut allergies, and all that kind of stuff. And I think the neat thing about it is it just raises the level of awareness of what goes into food, but not from a negative standpoint. It's actually creates a different type of conversation, because then you explore things like, oh, that bread, that pizza dough is gluten free. That's really good. How did you make that? Or what, all those kinds of things. I mean, gluten free is a whole nother area aside from vegan. And here's just an interesting piece about what I found as far as the stereotypes. I've run into people that for some reason think that everybody who's vegan is also gluten free.
Yep.
And that's one I've had to dispel a number of times. Like, no, gluten free has nothing to do with vegan. There's a lot of people that are both, and I would surmise that probably a disproportionately higher percentage of the vegan population is also gluten free. But yeah, you get into all those types of conversations around food that are very different than, in a non-vegan context. You're focusing on the flavor, the experience, which all still is part of it. But then you start having conversations about the nutritional value, the environmental impact, the ethical impact, and it adds more layers and dimensions to the whole experience.
Absolutely. For me, I think it makes all of it so much more enjoyable. And I just want to make a quick comment about the gluten-free products. A lot of the breads, at least, will often have eggs in them. So someone who's vegan and also gluten-free. I mean, as vegans, we're all reading labels all the time anyway, but just that's something that to be really mindful of. I tried gluten-free, not because I needed to, I just wanted to give it a whirl. And I didn't enjoy anything that I ate that was gluten-free. So since I didn't have to give it up for any like reason of being uncomfortable or actually being allergic to it, I decided not to be gluten-free.
Yeah, I'm still a glutton for gluten.
I love that. Me too.
Yep. I haven't given up coffee either. I was like, I gave up meat and I gave up cigarettes. I mean, what else do you want me to give up?
Don't take my coffee.
Yeah, exactly. That could be, yeah. That could be a book right there. Don't take my
Yep.
coffee.
I love it. Do you put anything in your coffee? Like, do you have a favorite plant milk you like to put in there?
I actually take it black.
Me
I
too.
haven't put anything in my coffee for probably, I'm going to say about 15 years, maybe longer. Although if I were going to put something in coffee, I'd probably go with maybe an almond milk creamer and a little bit of, was it the agave nectar?
Mm.
Possibly. I don't, I mean, I've gone to polar opposite extremes with coffee. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was like, I'd put a gallon of milk and a pound of sugar in a cup of coffee. And then I went over to drinking it straight black. So yeah, it's,
We, we are very similar that way. When I first tried coffee, I hated it. So I was essentially having a splash of coffee with cream and sugar because it was when I would order it, it would be cream until it's white and 12 sugars.
yep. No,
Thank
I
goodness
mean,
I was
I'm
a
sure
teenager.
people, one I used to get was, hey, you want some coffee with your cream?
Yeah. No, I don't. Just a splash. But yeah, now I drink it black too. And occasionally I'll throw some soy milk in there. But no, I like it. Just I want to enjoy the coffee. It's like a full experience for me. The smell, the taste, sitting there with the hot cup in my hand, like it's a whole thing. So I feel like when I put milk into the coffee, it takes a little bit of that away of the actual coffee experience for me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Did we cover? Oh yeah, we got to cover hummus, right? So we've got
Not
uh
yet.
oh not yet. We got more first.
Well, no, let's just go right to the hummus. We can end on something else.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
tell me about hummus.
Okay, so I'm not particularly brand sensitive with hummus, but I mean, I'll tell you, I could just get a tub of hummus and eat it with a spoon. Frankly, I could.
Guilty.
It's definitely on my top 10 list of foods that I would bring to a desert island if it had a refrigerator that lasted a long time. But I would say, I mean, so I could eat, just plain hummus is fine. I mean, garlic hummus has always been a go-to staple, but I like, in particular, I like the spicy pepper hummuses, and also I like blending up olives in hummus.
Oh,
I'm big on olives, and not everybody is, but I like to get like a mixture of green and black olives and stir those up in hummus. But I love to get some of those like the really heavy corn chips, the
mm,
ones with a good backbone to them. So mainly, so they don't break when you dip them in hummus. The thing I'm kind of snobby about with hummus is I can't let it get too warm. It's got
yeah.
to be fresh out of the refrigerator. I can't, like, if you show up for a party with a tub of hummus that's been in your car for an hour and a half and put it out on the table. I can't do it. So it's got to be cold to be good.
I agree completely. Yeah. And I too will eat it, right with a spoon. And the chips, that was something I didn't expect to like. I was very regimented with my like tortilla chips, and I was like, those go in salsa. And I would dip pitas, or I would put like pitas in the oven, crisp them up, and then use them with the hummus. But one day my husband was like, "Oh, we don't have any more pitas, but I really want hummus. Well, I'm just going to dip these tortilla chips in there." And ooh, just blew my mind. And then he added them to taco, and then he added hummus to tacos, and my whole world changed. But but yeah, now I love that. Like you said, a good sturdy chip and just dip it right in there and the whole tub just gone. So
Yep.
Dave, before we go, I just wanted to see if you have any helpful tips or any suggestions for people who are vegan curious or new vegans. What do you have to say to them?
Well, I think every step in the right direction is a good thing. I think that's really the mantra to keep in mind. So if you're if somebody who's curious about veganism and not entirely sure whether they want to do that or not, whether I would say the first thing to do is there's plenty of sources you can research there's and just start reading about it. But I think, yeah, if you're wanting to go vegan but not really sure that you can get 100% vegan, I've found that the best approach is to just think about, well, what step can I take if I want to make any kind of a change. So it might be, I'm going to eat one meal a week that's vegan. that could be, and if that's one meal a week that you were eating meat before, then that's a step in the right direction. And I think I would also strongly encourage looking at what social circles can you surround yourself for the purpose of getting more informed, not necessarily people that have to all be vegan, but anybody that is, just gonna likely to encourage you to take steps that you see as in the right direction. I think that I know plenty of people that are not vegan themselves, but have been very encouraging about my decision to go vegan. And I've also heard from people that have said, like, yeah, I'm not 100% vegan, but I decided I'm really trying to cut back on meat, and I'm trying to eat more vegan meals. I'm trying to get my whole family to eat more vegan meals. And so I think really, focus on the positive rather than the negative, and not think about, oh, I can't go 100% vegan. Okay, well, if you go 5% vegan, that's still, a step in the right direction. So it's the small steps are ultimately what make all the difference. And whether, regardless of whether it's something I'm trying to do myself or something I'm trying to encourage other people to do, there's really a clear distinction. I think it needs to be made in the way that I see a lot of people talk about holding someone accountable. It has a very negative connotation to it. It's almost like a punishing connotation of, I'm going to call you out. There's even a term now here, it's called call out culture, where it's like, I'm going to call out everybody who's doing something that I don't agree with. And why not instead kind of just flip that to the other side and say, I'm going to draw positive attention to people that are doing small things that are the right things. Even if there's 10 things I think they should be doing and they're only doing one of them, if I focus on the one right thing they're doing, then they're more likely to do two right things next week. And I think the more you focus on the positive and call attention to the positive, you encourage more of the positive. And if you call out the negative, you encourage more of the negative. So I think that's my overall philosophy. Can't really say I've proven it with data, but my experience has been that that's generally how things work.
I'd say the same in my life for sure. And that supportive community is really, can really be key. So yeah, definitely seek out people who will help you keep making those right decisions, who will be kind to you about it. It doesn't help to constantly cut someone down, just
Absolutely.
in any part of life. You're trying to encourage someone at their job, or yeah, to lose weight, or change, to stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly making them feel terrible about it isn't going to help them for
and,
sure.
and and it's not even just the obvious ways. There's a lot of subtle ways people cut each other down as well, in ways like this, kind of disguised with a smile or something that on the surface sounds like a nice comment, but I mean, nobody's fooled by it. Let's be honest.
Right.
It's so I think it's really, sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is nothing. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is be quiet and just pay attention. Not just listen to somebody's words, but pay attention to what's important to them. And I think I remember one of my favorite all-time quotes was from Zig Ziglar, who said, if you go into the world looking for friends, you'll find them scarce. But if you go into the world looking to be a friend, you'll find them everywhere. And I think really that needs to be at the core of any kind of a vegan initiative. Is I find that when people see that you care about what's important to them, then they get interested in what's important to you. So that really seems to be the right there, the key to everything.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So start building those relationships and being kind to each other. And goes back to your compassion, and how can we make that show up in every aspect of our lives, even when, and especially I think when it's really difficult.
No, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, like, to think about what might it look like to exercise compassion with somebody who does things that are distinctly not vegan, like, hunting, uh, cattle farming, all the, is it what the challenge to the vegans is to say, okay, how can I exercise compassion? And I think compassion begins with thinking. Like, the question is, how can I start with the assumption that people are basically good and have the right intentions? And if their actions are something that go against something that I consider to be a core value, instead of making jumping to conclusions and making assumptions about that, instead just begin to be curious about it, and to then instead ask, well, why is it that someone who ultimately has compassion inside them behaves in what I see as a non-compassionate way? Why might that be? And just actually be okay with not knowing the answer for a minute. I found that sometimes when I just walk around and just contemplate a question, it may be a matter of days or weeks or months or longer, but I don't necessarily always get the answers, but I get insights and I start seeing new things. Versus if I think I already know the answer, then I'm not looking for anything new. I'm just looking for people to agree with me. And then that's where you get that cult-like mentality from. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can challenge ourselves to stretch our thinking. And I think there's a lot of different dimensions that we begin to see when we do that. And I'm by no means claim to be the master of this. It's something I have to constantly work on myself. And I have to constantly be aware of trying to just restrain some of those Pavlovian triggered automatic reactions I have to words and phrases and different things, and be willing to rise above the reactions and be willing to make a conscious decision about how to respond to something.
Wow. You've given us a lot to think about today. That is amazing, Dave. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining me. I know I'm going to take away quite a few questions and maybe look deeper. I'm always, looking to learn. And I think that the approach and what you're getting at here is that we don't know everything and we have to be okay with it. And we can learn from other people, even if we don't think we can.
We absolutely can. Yes. No, I think that the people that challenge our thinking the most are often the best teachers we ever find.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm so honored to have had you here with me today.
It's an honor to be here. So thank you for having me.
What a great interview. So inspiring and motivating. Speaking with Dave reminded me that we can always put more love and kindness into the world, and it always starts with us. If you are an entrepreneur and interested in working with Dave, please visit www.dave-baldwin.com. Dave's site and links to anything else we mention here can be found in the show notes in your favorite app and at didyouBringTheHummus.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share with your friends who you think will enjoy this. After all, sharing what we love with those we love is one of the best ways to put more love into the world. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus? I hope you have found this episode helpful and inspiring. If you have questions or are a vegan who would like to be interviewed on a future episode, please visit my website at www.didyouBringTheHummus.com. Thanks for listening.